So this video is to talk about the Colorado River simulation, which accompanies the case study of the Colorado River. You'll have access to this slideshow, so I'm not going to read all the slides, but I'm just going to talk about the simulation, and hopefully by looking at this you'll have a better idea of how the simulation works and be more confident in doing it in your classroom. It's kind of tricky to visualize the simulation, so hopefully this helps. Here's a list of materials. So in TCI they give this simulation as a wet simulation, which requires pitchers, cups, drinking water, buckets, and what I've done is I've created a dry version of the simulation where you're representing the units of water with construction paper. So for this, if you want to do the wet version, you'll have to go ahead and look closely at the TCI directions. Otherwise, with the recommendations that I make and watching this video, you should be ready to do this dry simulation, which I think worked out pretty great. So you're going to need these roll cards to prepare for the simulation. You're going to want to cut this kind of stuff ahead of time, and I've created this worksheet too that goes along with it that you can choose to use if you'd like. The worksheet area here, when covered with 1 unit of construction paper, represents water needs met. So this is what it looks like. Like I said, it's kind of hard to visualize, so hopefully by seeing some pictures it'll help you. You basically have a string yarn with the water units stapled to it, and so preparing the materials ahead of time is important. I used file folders, 1 for each of my blocks, and I prepared materials for each block because I wouldn't have time to reset them between. So you have the phase cards here, the roll cards, you've got the paper units cut there, and note that I've put a sticky to remind myself of the number of units in that bundle, because matching the number of units of water to the number of kids participating in the simulation is part of the challenge. Okay, so to start with, you're going to only have this masking tape outline of the river taped to the floor, and the border will not be there. You can use whatever you want to make a border. The dams or the reservoirs will not be there yet. You'll start with just the blank river. Here's what the water looks like nearby the source. Here is my source, which are the mountains, and the water comes from the mountains in this yarn. You just pull this yarn and it kind of tumbles out of there, and then you tow it down the river, and it kind of flows, and it's fun for the kids. Then they just grab a unit of water off of the yarn by just tearing it, and it's all stapled, paper stapled to the yarn. So that's what it looks like after you pull it out and it all flows down, and once the kids have cooperated to place the dams in the locations that they want and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully that'll help you visualize what's going on here. Like I said, if you have multiple sections, and if you want to do more than one phase with each section, you might need to prepare more than one set of the water. If you did the wet version, you'd have to refill your pitchers and measure your water and be sure that you have just the right amount poured each time into the cups and all that. So I think the dry version's good, as long as you're willing to prepare these materials ahead of time. So in the worksheet you can talk about the approximate year in each phase. Each phase of the simulation is an approximate year's range in history, so you can check their understanding when they write their year in here. For early Americans, the year must be sometime before the 17 or 1800s, and so you can check their understanding based on what they write there. Be sure that they have their mindset for the correct time in history. In the phase 1 with the early Americans, you can see there's plenty of space here near alongside the river where they can each meet their needs. When the water flows down the river, we end up collecting it in this bin, which is representative of the Gulf of California. And I can just pull the string up out of the bin to show them visually how much water there was left over. In later phases, when more people arrive to the region, I can compare visually that there's much more water left over in the past than there is now. So you can see here, as it begins to get crowded, students need to start problem solving on how they'll share the water. They can see visually here that the needs were not met completely because it's only partially covering the rectangle. You can see here they've talked about building an aqueduct to reach a student that there wasn't space available for him to go alongside the river. You can see here the students working to create dams to form reservoirs, share the water, and so they're working on fractions or equal parts to divide, and this photo they're just cooperating to lay those dams out there. You could use meter sticks like I did for the border for those, or you can use yarn, or you can talk to the kids about how they want to do that. And in the end, there's a nice connection to be made to the ecology of the region, where there wasn't any water left over for the river delta area in the estuary, which would have been at the Gulf of California. So there were huge environmental impacts to the way that we dammed the flow of the river. So the playlist for these videos is attached. This video in particular talks nicely about how the governments must cooperate to solve this problem. So it brings a nice way to discuss the relationship between our governments and the types of issues that they have to cooperate to solve. And it shows very clearly how in this region the dams really did affect the environment too. So I would recommend watching this video before you even start the simulation and using it to talk to the kids. Other recommendations that I have, make connections to the 3 E's from previous lessons, which are air conditioning, aqueducts, and automobiles, to reinforce the ideas that they didn't just bring water to the area by creating these dams, they also provided energy to the region too. Extending the lesson, talking about the environmental impact in the river delta area is definitely something that we enjoyed spending time on. And additional discussions about conservation of all resources will be rich following this activity. So it really does demonstrate scarcity well, and it demonstrates our decisions that we make and how they impact not just people around us, but also our environment. And so creating a poster project or an infographic project to raise awareness about water conservation in the region, or any other issues that you might want to do with regards to conservation, would be a good opportunity to do there now. We have some students in our class doing water pollution in our region. That's more of an issue than scarcity of water. So conservative use and being aware of waste is more of our concern here in the Midwest. So lots of directions you could go with the extensions following the activity. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what exactly to expect. And in the simulation, it was a little hard for me to visualize how it all went together. And so after I did it, I wanted to help you guys out and make this video to show. So look at the slideshow and have fun doing the activity. Thanks.